It was never considered as anything more than a B-side. This Billboard #1 hit was passed up for inclusion on at least 2 solo albums and a couple with his band, before finally landing as a 1984 movie headliner. Rescued from the cutting floor, it has since become one of the most memorable and impassioned songs of the 80s, bringing heart-rending catharsis to millions. Get ready for a tale that is as timely as it is emotionally devastating. Featuring one of the most prolific songwriters of the rock era, also one of the most underappreciated vocalists. Coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember the battle between VHS and Betamax, you're going to dig this channel. Make sure to subscribe below right now to be a part of our Nostalgia Daily, straight from the artists, the stories of the songs. Click the bell so that you never miss out. Make sure to check out our exclusive content on Patreon. The link for that's below. That helps us to continue to keep this a daily channel. We really appreciate that. We also have our latest additions voted by you guys. The Vintage Years collection, the new years are up right now. You can click up here, or you can go to ProfessorRock.com to get those. So it's time for another episode of our series, The New Standards. This is where we break down a song that has transcended fads, genres, and chart position to become a mainstay in the Great World Songbook. I used to call it the Great American Songbook. Today's heart-wrenching ballad, it went all the way to #1, though it was a dark horse to even be released, apparently. When Phil Collins was approached to write the title song for the 1984 film Against All Odds, he actually already had it, albeit in a preliminary rough cut form, originally titled How Can You Sit There? Collins' Against All Odds Take a Look at Me Now, parentheses song. That was written in 1979 during the formative sessions for his debut solo album, Face Value. However, Phil Collins didn't really care for it, and it fell by the wayside. In fact, Phil Collins completely ignored it when he was putting together his album. He called it a B-side in the best-case scenario. A year later, when Collins was recording his second solo effort, Hello, I Must Be Going, Against All Odds was passed over again, nor was it considered for any of the 3 contemporary Genesis albums in that time, Duke in 1980, Abacab in 81, and Genesis in 83. In Phil's mind, the song was a bit mediocre, just a throwaway track. However, this obscure demo would be resurrected from the trash heap, when Taylor Hackford came knocking on Phil Collins' door in December of 82. Hackford, a film director, was just coming off shooting An Officer and a Gentleman. Of course, that was a massive success, had a big hit of its own tied to it. He wanted to keep the ball rolling with his next movie, Against All Odds. It was dubbed a romantic neo-noir thriller about an aging football star that was hired by the mob. It was actually a modern update of the film from 1947 Out of the Past.
I could have run away last night.
I'd find you.
When Taylor Hackford signed with Atlantic Records, he was given a roster of artists to choose from for the film's theme song. But as it turned out, Collins was really the only one that Hackford was even considering. So he tracked Phil Collins down in Chicago, where he was on tour, and he asked him to write him a song for this particular movie. Collins, however, he didn't think he had the time to do it, but Hackford was undaunted, and he showed Phil a cut of the film on the VCR in his hotel room.
I want her back, and I want you to find her for me.
After watching it, something clicked in Phil Collins' head. He remembered that he had his, this old unfinished song called How Can You Just Sit There? Maybe that could work. Of course, he didn't have as much time, so he thought of that. After their meeting in Chicago, Collins started putting together a proper recording of this song. He teamed up with legendary producer Arif Mardin, who oversaw the piano parts and the orchestration. Those were recorded in New York at RCA Studios. He would then connect with Collins in LA to record the drums and coax out some of the most emotionally raw vocals of Phil Collins' career, if not the entire 80s. Against All Odds, Take a Look at Me Now, when it was complete, Hackford was absolutely thrilled with it. It was, in his words, a textbook case of designing a song to reflect what the film is. The song appeared in the movie as background music during the movie's closing credits. And as the song's radio airplay increased, people came in droves to see the movie based solely on the reputation of the song. Against All Odds, the film, that received a mixed response from viewers and reviewers then and now. It currently has a 64% score from critics and a 45% score from audiences on Rotten Tomatoes.
Against All Odds.
Gary, he could hurt us.
You mean he could hurt me?
Not exactly inspiring, but honestly, it is the song that history will always remember. With Against All Odds, Phil Collins scored his first #1 hit, and he won a Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance in 1985. So this episode is sponsored by Zenni Eyewear, my favorite accessory. Right now, you can get a brand new pair of glasses for about half the price of a vinyl record. The quality for the cost is phenomenal. You got to check it out today at Zenni.com. So in retrospect, Against All Odds was an improbable candidate for any degree of success. You might even say the song itself had to fight against all odds just to come into existence. It's hard to imagine the 80s without it. But the movie angle is really just half the story. To really appreciate Against All Odds, you got to have some idea of where it came from and why it was written. Although it's not the happiest of tales. Something you would assume if you've ever heard the song in its proper perspective. In 1979, Phil Collins' marriage was on the rocks. He'd been married to his wife Andrea since 1975, but they had come to a crossroads in their relationship. Collins was basically confronted with a choice between his family and his career, though he probably didn't see it that way at the time. Genesis was getting ready to break out in a big way. They were transitioning from a progressive rock outfit to a band with a lot more mainstream appeal. So Phil told Andrea that if Genesis was really ever going to make it, they needed to spend the next year or so touring America, Europe, maybe even Japan. They had big plans. However, Andrea said, if that's what Phil chose to do, they wouldn't be married when he came back from the tour. Phil Collins didn't believe her, and he chose the tour. She was serious, and she filed for divorce. It was no doubt a devastating loss for Phil Collins when, reflecting back on the origins of Against All Odds, he recalled, "It was written during my first divorce. My first wife and the kids had gone, and I was just left there. The song was written out of an experience as opposed to a what-if song. If that personal stuff hadn't happened to me at that time, I probably would never have made an album." As Phil reluctantly returned to bachelorhood, he opted to transform his master bedroom into an ad hoc studio. I suppose it was a fitting symbol since Collins, whether intentionally or not, he had sacrificed his marriage for his music career, as she had said. After arranging his bedroom studio with pianos, a synthesizer, his drum kit, and a newly acquired CR-78 drum machine, Phil got right to work, and in this hollow, echoey, house is not a home atmosphere, Phil Collins began pulling his dejected thoughts out of the ether. It was effectively a prolonged subconscious therapy session. Music became his escape and his vehicle for voicing the mixture of emotions churning inside of him. Anger, regret, hope, anguish, and melancholy. They were all there and more, and they all needed someplace to go. Phil said that at this point, he didn't really have any expectations or ambitions for what he was writing. And yet, over the course of a year, these doodles, as he called them, they slowly began to take shape. Free-flowing as if he dreamt it out of nowhere. They were improvisational, off the cuff, but very much true. And whether he knew it or not, they were all building towards something very tragically beautiful. Much of the material Collins put together was actually quite reactionary, often resulting from phone conversations with his ex-wife Andrea. In his memoirs, he wrote, "Whenever I call to speak to her in Vancouver, I have difficulty getting through, literally and figuratively. I don't seem to be reaching her. Some calls were good, others weren't." Phil remembers one conversation in particular when Andrea repeatedly slammed the phone down to make a point. Conversations like this typically led to some pretty dark lyrics, including the infamous, "If you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a hand." And wipe off that grin, "I know where you've been. It's all been a pack of lies." Both of those, of course, from In the Air Tonight. Sometimes, though, Phil Collins hung up the phone feeling hopeful and sentimental. Maybe they could work things out after all. You catch a sense of this when he sings, "I wish I could write a love song to show you the way I feel." Phil's range and diversity of emotion is just so true to life. Anyone who's ever tried to navigate a broken relationship knows how quickly feelings can change. And the way Phil Collins emoted, internalized, and interpreted the songs of this time as he was in absolute anguish at times. From In the Air Tonight to If Leaving Me Is Easy. They're some of the most devastatingly honest and heart-wrenching vocals ever put to record. Whatever your opinion is of Phil Collins, these three songs, along with a few others, and the bulk of Face Value, really are undeniable, vocally and lyrically, in these emotional songs. He just tapped into something that only the great ones have. I'm talking about Frank Sinatra.
So make it one for my baby.
Joni Mitchell. I mean, high praise for sure, but go back and listen. Tell me that I'm wrong. At this point in time, Phil Collins wasn't really sure what these burgeoning songs were even about. He was, after all, a first-time songwriter at this point, working through one hell of a breakup. But like a phoenix rising from the ashes, the majority of this heavy-hitting material found its way into his solo album, Face Value. Some of it spilled over to Genesis Duke as well. Of course, today's featured song is the primary exception, though Against All Odds was just as poignant, if not more so than even the rest. It was nevertheless tossed to the scrap heap. It's funny how sometimes we just don't know what we have when we have it. Phil really had no idea that in a few short years, this lost demo would transform into one of the most hauntingly beautiful power ballads of all time. A part of the reason that Against All Odds didn't make it onto Collins' debut Face Value was because it was, competing with another ballad that Phil Collins was writing. It was called You Know What I Mean.
Just leave me alone with my dreams.
Phil said Against All Odds was written in the same misery that the rest of Face Value came from. But he said, I wasn't drawn to it initially. I don't like it as much as You Know What I Mean, and I thought there was only room for, one of those on this album. The similarities, between the two songs are evident, but not surprising since they were born from, again, that same moment in time. I mean, each is a piano-driven ballad confronting the hopeless resignation that it's time to move on.
My dreams, I can do without you.
With Against All Odds, there's such a deep sadness in every single word. Anyone who's ever suffered through a devastating breakup can testify that Phil's lyrics speak honest truth. When he sings, how can I just let you walk away?
How can I just let you walk away?
Just let you leave without a trace. That's a harsh indictment of his own fault in this relationship, you think about it. Why has he stopped fighting for this woman that he used to love or still loves? Didn't she mean everything to him? But by the second verse, Phil has found more blame to spread around. Collins twists those very same words that they are pointing at her. How can you just walk away from me when all I can do is watch you leave?
How can you just walk away from me?
Consistent with pretty much everything else that he was writing at that time. Against All Odds presents us with a really complicated narrative. I mean, no one is fully at fault, nor are they free from it, but mixed with the anger and disbelief is regret and longing, remembrance. Because we shared the laughter and the pain and even shared the tears. And then after singing, "You're the only one who really knew me at all," for the second time, Collins goes in for the emotional kill. So take a look at me now. Oh, there's just an empty space.
There's just an empty space.
And there's nothing left here to remind me, just a memory of your face.
Remind me, just a memory of your face.
And the passion and the sorrow that Collins expresses in these lyrics can't be faked. And they're twice as soul-crushing when you consider Collins is not only describing how he feels inside, but that he's referencing his physical surroundings as well. I mean, written in an empty house, no wife, no kids, no noise, no anything, totally alone. Just the quiet stillness of a hollow and intangible memory of his ex-lover's face.
Of your face. Ooh, take a look at me now.
This song is a desperate plea to just turn back the clock to yesterday before it all came apart. It just breaks your heart, breaks mine every time I hear it. Especially after that first chorus, when he plays sort of that watered down sequel to his big drum part from In the Air Tonight.
You and me. I wish I could just
I mean, this one isn't quite as ear-splitting, but the emotion, it's all there. Especially when he goes into the next vocal.
turn around and see me cry.
And then follows with the two-part harmony. It's just legendary.
So many reasons why.
Against All Odds, Take a Look at Me Now. It topped the Billboard Hot 100 song chart and it became Phil Collins' first American #1 song. The first of 7 U.S. solo #1 hits. There was Sussudio, One More Night,
Give me one more night.
Separate Lives, A Groovy Kind of Love, Two Hearts, and Another Day in Paradise.
Just one night, another day for you. You and me in paradise.
And those are just the #1 hits. I mean, you also had many others that broke the top 10 as well. Remarkably, Phil Collins was also charting hits with Genesis at that same time, including another #1 hit with Invisible Touch in '86.
Falling for her, she seems to have invisible touch.
It was an incredible run, such an astonishing streak of just blazing success. Now, internationally, Against All Odds became Collins' third top 10 single in the UK, peaking at #2 for 3 weeks in '84. It also went to #1 in Canada, Ireland, Israel, Norway, and Portugal.
So take a look at me now.
Against All Odds has also been featured in a lot of movies and television shows. There's Forces of Nature in '99, Wicker Park, that was in 2004, So You Think You Can Dance, The Other Guys, and Glee.
So take a look at me now.
And of course, it has been covered by a number of artists over the years. There's Mariah Carey, Montel Jordan, Bonnie Tyler teamed up with the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra to cover it as well. And both the Postal Service and Barry Manilow took a stab as well.
There's just an empty space.
Nobody, though, nobody holds a candle to Phil's electric version. And how crazy is it that when the song was nominated for an Academy Award, they wouldn't even let Phil Collins sing it? It was savage for him at this time. He had to sit there and watch Anne Reinking slaughter his beautiful, heartfelt #1 song.
And there's nothing left here to remind me.
And then he lost to this song.
To say I love you.
You had to feel for him. But he had his revenge in the form of mega success. I mean, he'd have the biggest album of the year in 1985, along with 3 more #1 hits. He'd also won the Grammy for Album of the Year. Now, Phil Collins has pointed out that Against All Odds, Take a Look at Me Now is one of the songs most mentioned by people when they write to him or talk to him. Responding to this, he wrote, "Why do these words and this song mean so much?" Well, it was written at the height of troubles with Andy, and forced at gunpoint to analyze it, I'd have to say it's a good breakup song with universal resonance and empathy. People hate a breakup, but they love a breakup song. Against All Odds pins down how it feels to be brokenhearted.
And I stand here taking every breath with you.
Funny how he calls it a good breakup song. How about a perfect song? It is a perfect song. For my money, it's on a short list of the most heart-rending laments of the decade. But at the same time, it's a quintessential musical therapy session for anyone who's been through something so destructive.
That's what I've got to face.
Many of us have an experience with this song. I have one. Remember one night, about 17 years ago, I was having a really rough night. My first marriage had blown up. In fact, that very day, the divorce had been finalized. And I was emotionally decimated. I remember I'd gone out on a date for the first time in about 7 years, because I was married for 7 years. It was pretty awkward. I wasn't ready for it. But, I kind of flung myself out there because the divorce was so emotionally draining, and I wanted to get on with my life, seeing as how she had gotten on with hers well before that. I knew that my ex-wife was out with this guy she liked, and I got this bright idea to call her up and sing Against All Odds to the top of my lungs, Just a rough night. I don't know what I was thinking. My plan was to call her cell, win her back by singing this song with a no-holds-barred emotional rendering of this song. It was like one of those Lloyd Dobler Say Anything movie moments that go off better in your head than they do in real life.
All my instincts.
Yeah, so I called her and I gave the performance of my life. I had the music already playing from behind as I hit the button, and I heard a muffled voice say hello, and I just swung into it with all my might, giving it everything I had. As soon as I was done, I just hung up, and I just sat there, waiting for a call back. I don't know what I was waiting for. My phone did ring immediately. It was my dad. I'm like, "Hey, Dad, what's up?" He said, "Well, that was one hell of a performance, but the odds are not in your favor because I'm happily married." And he started laughing. I'd accidentally called my dad instead of my ex. And my dad spent the next hour talking me down off this ledge. He told me, that my ex-wife wasn't worth this song. He told me it was time for me to move forward with my life. He said we weren't meant to be, and he was right. It was really embarrassing. I said, "Dad, did you seriously listen to me singing that whole song?" And he said, "Yeah, I figured you needed to get all that pain out, so I just let you go to town." It was an embarrassing situation for sure, but my dad never said a word to anyone. He never referenced it again. He knew I was hurting, that I was vulnerable and willing to make a fool of myself for someone who didn't give a rip about me. And he encouraged me and helped me through this horrible night, and I'll never forget it. Exactly 1 month later, I went on my first date with my now wife. I've been married for almost 17 years. The love of my life. I've never had to live out this song again, and that experience taught me a really valuable lesson. Sometimes when the world is falling down all around us and there's nothing left to say, wrapping yourself up in a song like this to express your utter anguish and despair can be the catalyst to spring you forward to something better. I listen to this song now, and even though it's been almost 2 decades, that pain can still seep in. And the scar is still there, but the lyrics mean something different to me, especially the last few words. Take a look at me now.
Take a look at me now.
Leave us a comment about Phil Collins in this once rejected #1 hit, Against All Odds, Take a Look at Me Now. What are your memories of the song? Did you ever make a fool out of yourself singing this? Oh, what was I thinking? How has it helped you get through a relationship or a heartbreak? Let us know in the comments. Again, we get a little emotional here sometimes on Professor of Rock. That's what music does to us. Check out our Phil Collins companion piece on In the Air tonight, a song from the same era. We can get deeper into the story there. Also, make sure to subscribe below so you never miss out on our daily videos. And check out our new Vintage Years collection. You're going to love it. So until next time, make sure to keep the music alive. 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Talk to you soon. Stay safe.